Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. Today's date is January 18, 2022. In this video, we're going to look at two articles from The Guardian in the UK about air filters in schools. Why is this important? Because COVID is airborne. Yes, it can be transmitted through droplets, which are larger and more subject to gravity, and they're going to fall downward and not stay suspended in the air. But sometimes particles are much smaller, and they do stay suspended in the air, and COVID can be transmitted this way as well. So you need high quality air purifiers to clean the air. Even with those in place, I would still suggest wearing an N95, but if you don't have them in place, then you're really only relying on that N95 as the barrier between you and those aerosolized particles. So obviously adding high quality air filters to, every school and workplace and everything, it's just not going to happen most places. But anyway, in the places where it is happening or something is happening, basically the two articles we're going to look at, on the one hand, there aren't enough air purifiers being given to the schools, and then on the other, they're not being used, some of them that are being given. So let's look at the first article. This is again from The Guardian. Headline, Schools in England say government not providing enough air purifiers. This is by Liz Lightfoot from Friday, January 14. Tagline is, Teachers accuse ministers of failing to act after union poll finds a third of classrooms monitored have poor ventilation. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised it's only a third, but let's see what it says. A handful of monitors to measure air quality in the classrooms of a large Midlands secondary school was nowhere near enough to go around, but sufficient to detect a problem. Quote, readings in some schools were well over the suggested clean air limit of 800 parts per million, said one teacher. We asked for action to be taken, but nothing was done, and now the monitors have been taken away. Nice. The teacher is not alone in his concern over poor air quality, which increases the risk of COVID infection in schools. Aware of the link, the government sent out to schools in England 35,000 monitors to check the quantity of CO2 in the air, measured in parts per million, mainly from exhaled breath. But it is only providing 8,000 air purifiers for classrooms. Now, a survey by the National Association of Head Teachers, NAHT, suggests that the Department of Education may have underestimated the demand. Of the 9 in 10 schools that received the monitors, more than a third, 34%, found classrooms with consistently poor levels of ventilation, the survey found. Of those, more than half, 53%, said even after taking action, they continued to have rooms with a red reading, denoting consistently poor air quality. Okay, so commenting, just to clarify, when I said I was surprised it was only a third, meaning I thought that they were saying that the others had high quality air filtration. They were just saying that they have poor ventilation, don't get enough fresh air, and there's too much CO2 in the classrooms. They're about to talk about the fact that only 2% of the schools are using air filters, so that is separate, and yeah, that's more what I was thinking. 2% is a lot less than a third. So continuing. It also showed that only a tiny 2% of schools are using air filters and cleaning devices provided by the government. A further 8% are using ones they bought themselves. So you got 10% total. 3/4 of the 1,625 schools in the survey said they could not afford such devices. Of course, the government recommends 2 filters suitable for a classroom, priced at £425 each, or £1,170 a unit. And of course, the filters are disposable, consumable, you have to replace them. Paul Whiteman, the NAHT's General Secretary, says the survey suggests 8,000 air filters are unlikely to satisfy demand from the more than 250,000 classrooms in England. Quote, we will encourage government to monitor demand and to make more available as required, to ensure all schools that need one get one. Adequate ventilation in classrooms should not be limited to first come, first served, he said. Nadine Zahawi, the Education Secretary, told the Commons this month that, quote, the majority of schools didn't report any issues with the atmosphere in the classroom. Okay. The government had ordered 8,000 purifiers because the feedback suggested that that was all that was needed. To provide them for all schools would be a waste of taxpayers' money. Okay, literally it's children breathing, but okay. However, Munira Wilson, the Liberal Democrat education spokesperson, says schools are missing out because the Department of Ed has set the bar too high. Only those rooms consistently above 1,500 parts per million of CO2 could get free filters, nearly twice 800 parts per million, the widely agreed safe level. Quote, the government has completely failed teachers, pupils, and parents alike with their botched air purifier scheme, she said. Not only do their own criteria fail to keep most classrooms safe, the earliest a school can access equipment is next month. This snail's pace is frankly unacceptable. Conservative ministers are spending twice as much on a royal yacht than it would cost to provide an air purifier for every classroom. That's what I'm saying. They are making schools compete for equipment to help keep their pupils and staff members safe, unquote. In Bradford, a study of air quality in 30 primary schools is seeking to identify the most efficient way of achieving clean air in the classroom and the link between CO2 levels and COVID transmission rates. One group in the study uses the conventional method of opening windows. The next also uses air filters, and the third group has UV lamps that kill the virus. Catherine Noakes, professor of environmental engineering at the University of Leeds, one of the researchers, says 800 parts per million or 1,500 parts per million should not be seen as hard measures. Quote, if your levels are 800 or below, then that's healthy and you don't need to do anything. If levels are routinely above 1,500 parts per million, then your ventilation is poor. You have a problem, and you need to do something about it, she says. Between 800 and 1,500, a lot of other factors have to be taken into account. You could get a school routinely getting 900 because of variations caused, for example, in the position of the sensors or the number of people in the room. The Department of Education said its statistics showed 99% of state-funded education settings had received a CO2 monitor. A spokesperson added, quote, air cleaning units are not needed in the vast majority of classrooms, only where there is poor ventilation that cannot be easily improved. Time out for a second. It's also the winter. Like, opening windows, not the easiest thing to do and won't be for a few months. Continuing. Based on feedback from schools that there are only a small number of cases where good ventilation is not possible, we are supplying up to 8,000 air cleaning units from next week. End quote. Can I just say, all these people seem to be talking past each other. This is kind of crazy that you can't have a simple discussion about, a fairly straightforward topic. As the environmental engineer said, you have a certain range which you can reliably say is safe, a certain range above which is definitely a problem, and then there's, kind of a yellow zone that has to be evaluated more closely, more on a case-by-case basis. But the rest of this is just kind of, it's clearly not a priority. It's a hot potato. Everybody's trying to, just pass it on, except for maybe a few. Continuing. Schools, nurseries, and colleges have until 17th of January to apply for 7,000 of the air cleaning units. Special schools and alternative provision settings have already been offered 1,000 units. Can I just add again? We're talking about a pandemic. Like, this would be one thing if we were just talking about air quality, period. That's important, but a little less urgent. Less of a out-and-out emergency, although really you don't want kids breathing dirty, stale, oxygen-poor air for like many hours at a stretch. That's not good. But also, we're talking about a pandemic. Like, that's why this is coming up. Continuing, quote, together with mass testing, bringing in supply staff, and the hard work of schools and teachers, we are confident that our measures will maximize classroom time for students, the spokesperson said. And that's the end of that article. So that's some of the situation with the air filters and the air monitors. Let's go to the next article, also from The Guardian. The headline here is, schools rejecting offers of air filters that limit COVID spread, say parents. Some families say purifiers are turned down by heads, school heads, I guess, prioritizing cleaning and open windows in absence of Department of Education guidance. This is by Georgina Quach, or Quach, I'm not sure. But let's get into it. Parents who offer to donate air filters that limit COVID transmission in their children's classrooms are being turned down by some schools, say parents groups. As head teachers report disruption caused by soaring staff absences, parents are buying high-efficiency particulate air filters, or HEPA filters, to supplement the 7,000 additional units that will be offered to schools in England by the Department for Education. While some heads have accepted parents' donations, others are prioritizing cleaning regimes and opening windows. Gee, almost like air filters are part of a cleaning regime because they clean the air, as official guidance does not specify the need for air filters and recommends that schools use their own risk assessments. Comment: does every school have access to the same high-quality levels of expert information? All right. Sarah Saul, the co-founder of parents group Safe Ed for All, said that some schools were rejecting the free filters because of insufficient government guidance. She said, quote, "I've encountered tens of schools which are forgoing layers of mitigation, including filters and ventilation improvements, because they have been poorly explained and aren't mandated by the government. Rejecting free donations just doesn't make any sense to us. We're not blaming school leaders, we're blaming the guidance that they're trying to follow wrongly," unquote. Gemma Sewell, the co-founder of Parents United UK, said, quote, "More often we see schools turning them down. One of the most common excuses is, if we accept it for your child's classroom, that's inequitable, because we can't afford to install them in all our classrooms." Karen Cudmore from Kent said she had offered to buy her children's secondary school's CO2 monitors and HEPA filters after her 14-year-old daughter contracted long COVID early last year. Quote, "Both schools have said that this isn't part of government guidance, and my children can just continue to wear masks if that makes them feel safe," unquote. Note the, kind of patronizing COVID-denying tone of the government. Oh, masks make you feel safe? Like, here's your security blanket. No, they're functional air filtering devices. We're in a pandemic. Okay. It's just, it's frustrating needing to remind people. We're in a pandemic. We're actually in the worst wave of the pandemic by far right now. I don't know what else to say, Anyway, Jeff Barton, the General Secretary of the Association of School and College Leaders, said, quote, "It is very kind of parents to offer to pay for air filters, and we understand their concerns. But schools may understandably want to identify where the units are needed, and then apply for the equipment that is being provided through the government scheme in the first instance," unquote. So they're going to talk about the government scheme and how you qualify, but do you understand their concerns? And is it understandable that the schools wouldn't be using them? I mean, you send your child to school wearing clothing and, with other things that they need for the day to stay safe and comfortable. Clean air really is something that you're partaking in multiple times per minute. That's not debatable, okay? That's a constant ongoing need. Anyway, continuing. To qualify for a government air purifier, schools must show that they have consistently poor CO2 levels. And commenting again, that doesn't mean that, an air filter is somehow harmful. Like, you use a filter in the classroom that is already decent. Great, it's going to be extra decent. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't some other classroom that probably needs it more, but you're still giving extra protection in the one room, even if you haven't identified the need for the other. You know what I'm saying? Like, in the meantime, there's no reason not to do anything at all. Just doesn't make any sense. Anyway, continuing. But according to research by NASUWT, that's a bad acronym, NASUWT, the teachers union, more than half of UK teachers, 56%, do not have access to a CO2 monitor in their classroom. So how are you going to figure out which rooms are the bad ones if you're not monitoring? One parent from Suffolk took her teacher out of lessons because of fears of rising infection among other children after the head teacher rejected her HEPA donation. She said the Academy Trust had no plans to install filters. I'd just like to comment there. I just had to withdraw temporarily for this term from my school program that I was going to do. And I had a need for this, and I thought that it was a good move for me. But there weren't protections, and so I have to sit this term out literally because of situations exactly like this. If I had been allowed, well, I'm not sure I could have afforded enough filters for everywhere I would have been, but yeah, it's just we're in a pandemic. The governments are trying to deny it, and this is just horrible policy. And people are staying home. I mean, I was just reading a post from somebody today. The choices are be employed and infected, or unemployed and uninfected. And of course, the same goes for school. This is the choice that people are being confronted with now. Demands are growing for the Department of Education to fund units for all schools, amid discontent at leaving windows open during winter, you think? Patrick Roach, the NASUT General Secretary, said, efforts to ensure good ventilation in the fight against COVID should not be a lottery for schools. Hear, hear. They should be guaranteed the necessary equipment rather than being offered a chance to bid for an air purifier. Yeah, it's literally a lottery of like, will you breathe a virus or not? The Department of Education said air cleaning units are not needed in the vast majority of classrooms. Oh, if you were monitoring them, I might believe you a little bit more about like your ability to state with clarity and confidence which classrooms they're needed in. Only where there is poor ventilation that cannot be easily improved, based on feedback from schools that there are only a small number of cases where good ventilation is not possible. We are supplying up to 8,000 air cleaning units from this week. But again, according to the teachers union, more than half of teachers don't have access to a CO2 monitor, 56%. So how is the Department of Education making that statement? Obviously, they're pulling it out of their ass. So that's the end of the second article. And, the last video that we put up on the channel was about student walkouts and the Chicago teachers strike in the United States. And I'm told by a commenter there are also student walkouts happening in Texas. I'm sure that there are others around the country getting less press as well. This is the situation. I mean, it's a pandemic, and the government's trying to pretend it doesn't exist. And obviously not just the U.S. government. And they're also, the U.S. government won't even recommend N95 masks. I just saw a thing on that. The CDC director, Rochelle Walensky, was asked, will you at least recommend that people wear N95s or KN95s? She said no. So they've still got, and in fact, I mentioned my school, they were recommending cloth masks at my school. We know that those are basically useless against aerosols. So it's just, they're giving March 2020 advice when we know a lot more, from the last 22 plus months of research on this thing. This is capitalism. They need business to just keep running without interruptions. And they've found politicians and, heads of political appointees like the CDC who are willing to dance to the tune of capital. I mean, it is a capitalist government. The point of the capitalist government is to maintain and expand capitalism. But, for all the people who are like, we believe in science or whatever, I believe in science too. And I also know that science, the implementation of scientific findings, are absolutely constrained by the class interests at play. And when you have a for-profit economy that absolutely does not want or can't survive, in fact, long stalls in its operation, then the science will be ignored and or distorted in order to fit the needs of the ruling class, the capitalist class. So that's where we're at, and it's falling on working people and students to fight back. I mean, basically, that's the point we're at. It's just we need to revolt. That's pretty much all we got. The next story that I'm going to be putting up on the channel, in fact, is about the CDC. And from my first pass on this article, it seems that the CDC was about, this floored me, was about to dismantle its pandemic task force right before Omicron hit. That is how much they don't want to deal with this. So when they say that your air is clean, I would get a second opinion. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. What do you think? Leave a question or comment below. Any sincere question or comment will not get dogpiled, so ask away, even if it's at a beginner level. Otherwise, thanks for listening, and thanks to the current patrons whose names are on the screen. If you'd like to get your name on the screen, head to patreon.com/socialismforall. There's a link to Patreon in the video description. Every donation is encouraging. They're also materially helpful, so thank you very much for that. I appreciate all of the sponsorship and support. If you'd like to help out without making a donation, you can help the channel grow by liking, sharing, subscribing, and leaving a comment, even if it's just good video or thanks. All of that helps to boost the videos and the channel in the YouTube algorithm. And of course, sharing them puts them directly in front of new potential audience members. We do need to expand this conversation about opposing capitalism and building a workers' movement for ending capitalism. Along those lines, back in the real world, join an organization, or at least consider a donation to an organization if you're not ready to join yet. We do need to get people organized. Agitation and education are important. Ultimately, the organizing needs to happen so that we can call for protests and rallies and other kinds of demonstrations, strikes. We need organizations to actually pull those things off. So find an organization in your area that's doing the kind of work that you'd like to be a part of. Contact them with your questions, maybe attend a meeting if they allow you to do that. Try to get a sense of if it's a healthy, active organization, because an organization can look great on paper. If in practice it's actually dysfunctional, that can be a huge drain on your life. So just something to think about. Response time can be a key indicator there when you contact them. Or start a project of your own. If you have an idea and the comrades and the resources to get it going, we can always use good news about new projects starting up. All right, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks again, and we will catch you in the next video.